Our first panel discussion is up next and will address the topic of Stronger Together, supporting gender equity through male allyship. Our moderator for this panel is no stranger to us here at CANTO. She is Wendy McDonald, and she's also an advocate for companies within the region to hire and promote women in leadership positions. She provides strategic communication support for business critical initiatives, including developing and guiding the implementation of communication plans related to key business lines and group initiatives, such as in-country branch launches and new products and services as well. Now, she also provides strategic support for key functional areas, such as content, special projects, sponsorships, and CSR initiatives. Now, Wendy has been given the exciting task of guiding us through this particular discussion. She moderates this discussion with Victoria Simons, Chief Leadership and People Development of IADB, Franklin Butler, CEO, Cable Bahamas, Lisa Agard, CEO, TSTT, and Simone Shulgan. She's also there as well. Simone, good morning to you also from our CEO of Flow Trinidad. So Simone Martin Shulgan, let me stand corrected on that. So welcome back to the CANTO stage. Wendy, take it away.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Good morning, all. As you know, I am Wendy McDonald, chairperson of the CANTO's Women in ICT Committee and honored host of this year's first panel. Thanks to the CANTO board for the opportunity to engage in this very important topic, and to you, our members and audience, for joining us. Gender inequity has long been a major concern throughout the corporate world, and in particular, the underrepresentation of women in leadership roles in information communications and technology continues to be a fundamental challenge. The extraordinary accomplishments of the Caribbean in the form of high literacy rates and access to post-secondary level education, where enrollment and matriculation levels of women continue to significantly outpace those of men, together with the high penetration of ICT infrastructure and a heightened interest in gender parity, means it's never more apparent that this issue needs our focused attention. We readily commend all those companies that have already taken steps forward to establishing, promoting, and practicing a culture of equity, diversity, and inclusion. However, the time has come for stronger commitment from our governments, the private sector, and international organizations that work in the region to meaningfully address the issue and drive measurable change by implementing policies to attract and retain women with a clear goal of achieving diversity and gender balance, particularly at the leadership level. As some of you may recall, the Women's Committee hosted a discussion on women in leadership in the ICT space during the annual conference last year. Our objective was to start the conversation here about the disproportionate number of women in leadership across the region, with the goal of imploring our member organizations to take the lead in narrowing the divide. One clear way of doing so is through allyship, which not only directly benefits the various silently marginalized groups in the workplace, but by extension benefits businesses, industries, economies, and society. Women need allies in men to support us consciously and actively at work and in life. And while there are some very evolved and committed men in our audience who are allies and mentors to women, allyship extends beyond the workplace and workspaces into our homes and daily life. Allyship in the home includes sharing in all household responsibilities, including meal preparation, housework, and childcare. It also means more men should see and be encouraged to support their partners who pursue opportunities, notwithstanding the considerable time commitments involved. The statistics have shown us that women do not apply for jobs or refuse promotions because it takes them away from their childcare and household responsibilities. Our society often fails to recognize the challenges and barriers that women continue to face. Deliberate actions are needed to create and sustain an environment that enables and values all participants and contributors. Our committee supports diversity in many forms, and our work is laser focused on bringing together those who believe in the strength and equality of women. If there's one thing the COVID-19 global pandemic has made clear, is that we are collectively better off when there's mutual respect and parity at home and at work. In fact, research tells us that diversity, equity, and inclusion are vital to better, stronger companies and faster economic recovery. We've seen numerous examples that women achieve gender parity exponentially faster when men are a part of the solution, and even more so when they are our allies. So, on that note, we've convened a panel of C-suite executives who walk the talk, advocating for women within their workplace and the industry at large. This morning, we expect to have a lively and informative conversation under the theme Stronger Together, Supporting Gender Equity Through Male Allyship. We will begin with a keynote from Victoria Cardenas-Simons, Chief Leadership and Employee Development at the Inter-American Development Bank multilateral institution, who will also moderate the panel. Victoria has been Chief of Leadership and Employee Development in the Human Resources Department at the IDB since 2013. In this capacity, she has developed a comprehensive Academy of Learning programs for bank executives and supervisors, as well as technical administrative support staff. She leads the flagship program for emerging women leaders, which has been adapted and delivered in the Latin American region for women across the public and private sector. She's also launched several innovative programs for senior leaders, including leadership and disruptive change and purposeful leadership. Victoria also manages the Mentoring, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Onboarding, Languages and Culture, and Career and Performance Management program. Victoria has 25 years experience in human resources management, organizational effectiveness, and leadership development with international organizations, governments, and the private sector. Prior to joining the IDB, she worked at the World Bank, where she held a variety of executive positions, including manager of the leadership and client engagement programs and manager of Global Staff Mobility Unit. She's also worked in leadership positions in the US Department of State. What an impressive resume, and please help me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Victoria Cardenas-Simons. Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks so much, Wendy, for this kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to join you today at this CANTO Forum. I'm truly impressed with all the great work you're doing, and listening to all the introductory remarks and speakers from all of you. It's really impressive what you're doing. And I'm especially delighted with today's topic. Supporting gender equity through male allyship is a strategy we've successfully embraced at the Inter-American Development Bank. I look forward to sharing some of these experiences with you this morning. But first, let me share a very brief details of my personal journey with you. I was born in Colombia. Over the past 4 decades, I've been privileged to work and live all around the globe, from Malawi to Ecuador, from Chile to Israel, from Holland to the United States. I've enjoyed all my jobs. As Wendy mentioned, I've been with the US State Department, then with the World Bank, and now at the Inter-American Development Bank. These experiences helped me build a global perspective on how to improve lives by enhancing leadership potential and talent. Here at the Inter-American Development Bank, gender equality and diversity are cornerstones of our vision for where our bank needs to be by 2025. This is a tough task. As you well know, Latin America and the Caribbean suffers from persistent inequality extending to gender issues as well. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed and even widened these gaps. We believe that empowering women and other vulnerable populations who bear most of the burden will result in a faster recovery from the pandemic. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is therefore front and center in the agenda at the Inter-American Development Bank. We have an ambitious DEI framework, placing both equity and equality as integral elements in our strategy. For us, equality means giving everyone the same opportunity to achieve. Meanwhile, equity involves providing employees the needed support, recognizing that there are differences between the two. Let me now share with you some of the steps we've taken to advance gender equity at the IDB. We were pleased that since 2016, we've been EDGE certified. EDGE stands for Economic Dividends for Gender Equity. It's a standard methodology and global certification system for assessing and tracking steps to close the gender gap. Last year, we advanced to the second level, which is EDGE Move, becoming the first international financial institution in the Americas and the second worldwide to achieve this distinction. We're advancing across all 5 criteria that EDGE measures to chart equity performance. As you can see in the chart, we are advancing in all of those 5. We're proud of our achievements, but also aware that there is much more work to be done. Let me now share with you some of the targets we put in place to also guide our progress. To increase the probability of female selection, we set a gender balance of 50-50 for shortlisted candidates in our recruitments. We also targeted 43% of women at our mid and senior grades for the next year. So we're hoping to complete this 43% next year. And I'm happy to share that we're also already at 42%, so we're almost there. Finally, we aim to a 60-40 female-male ratio for promotions in our technical grades. We're pleased with our record, but we still have a long way to go. To advance towards our goals, we developed an ambitious DEI framework, diversity and inclusion framework, which ensures that leadership, talent management, and risk assessment place equity at the center of everything we do. This framework has 3 main priorities. First, expanding leadership accountability and senior management, activism, and DEI. Second, building a diverse workforce through targeting talent attraction, recruitment, and retention. And finally, mitigating risks and barriers to equity. I'm pleased with the wide range of initiatives and programs we have put in place at the IDB to support women's career development. You can see there the variety. Some of these include our institutional mentoring program, Laboratoria, which is a 1-year partnership to nurture the professional growth of young women in technology, and several other executive programs. Now, let me introduce one of our flagship initiatives for high potential women, the Emerging Women's Leadership Program, which we started in 2013. This 6-month tailored program enhances their leadership potential, provides visibility for them, and empowers them to progress in their career. It has been really rewarding to have been leading this program from the start, and I'm always thrilled to catch up with the graduates and learn about their progress. This program has also contributed to achieve the target that I mentioned, 43% of women at mid and senior ranks by next year. So far, we have delivered 18 programs, and the results have been impressive. Of the 300 graduates, more than half have been promoted. And going back to the theme of today's event, we have integrated male colleagues as allies, and as you can see in the photo from one of the programs in Panama, each woman identifies a male ally who accompanies and advises her through the program. A key component of this partnership with male mentors is helping women build greater confidence and leadership presence. We found that this support helps women enhance their potential to navigate, lead, and indeed succeed. Men can play 3 distinct roles. As mentors, they guide. As allies, they speak positively. And as sponsors, they help make decisions and advance their careers. We also know that people with successful professional histories have typically had more than one mentor. Now, we use these 2 books, We, Men, Women, and the Decisive Formula for Winning at Work is a book that we use quite a bit, is by Rania Anderson, and also The Confidence Code by Katie Kay and Claire Chipman, which illustrate the value of enhancing confidence through engagement with male allies. Now here, one of the most important activities that we do in this program involves bringing women together in a group setting with their male mentors. We invite a male champion who tells his story about the value and results he has obtained while mentoring women. And I'm sure here in the audience, male mentors, I'm sure that many of you have played this role of being a champion with women. Well, now, what we do during this activity, we share some best practices on how men can become more effective allies. First, eliminate behaviors and practices that negatively impact women, such as bias, negative comments, and inappropriate behavior. Second, expand interactions with women by giving them credit for good work, sponsoring them, and assigning challenging tasks. Third, encourage women to take advantage of high impact opportunities to achieve their full potential. And finally, engage, which means participate in activities that elevate women. So whoever you are, please become an ally. Let me share some suggestions on what mentors and mentees should not do. Mentors don't dominate the conversation, don't assume they have the same experience, don't avoid tough feedback, and don't solve challenges. Mentees, on the other hand, don't miss sessions, don't get sidetracked, don't fail to follow up, and don't think their mentor is responsible for solving their challenges. Finally, let me share with you what has worked well for us and some lessons learned. We have learned that having senior management support in this, very important, being champions and putting this agenda in the forefront has been key. We also find that it's really important to engage the males, and also that they feel really that this is something that they want to do, and they commit and engage. We have had, this program consistently, but we also have a lot of other efforts that go in tandem, and having them share, those experiences has been incredible because it's them speaking and walking the talk. Now, some lessons learned include we need to keep males, male mentors engaged. It's very important. And also that to provide them with training and other activities so that, we give them the tools that they need. Now, expanding the network that they have has been very important with their female mentees, and also communication skills. That communications is one of the areas that we all work at in this relationship. It's really, really important. And the learning experience is rich for both males and females. Now, here I want to share some quotes from women who have benefited by having male allies. They have been vocal about the benefits of this partnership, including growing the network and daring to go for a job they might have not thought of because they saw it as a stretch. Now here in this slide, you see some pictures of our partners. We find that our male mentors have been equally delighted to play this important role, recognizing that everyone benefits, women, men, and the organization as a whole. So charge ahead with making male allyship a key part of your organizational culture. And please count on the IDB for continued support and encouragement as you move along this path. Thank you, and let me now turn the program to Wendy to introduce the panelists for our discussion.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for sharing your personal journey, as well as the great work that the IADB is doing to support the advancement of women. We at CANTO look forward to partnering with you to bring some of those programs to our region. We definitely need them. So we'll now move into the panel discussion, which will be moderated by Victoria. But before we do so, we'd like to run a quick poll so that we can have an understanding of where we are with allyship. If you would look to the right top of your screen, you will see a poll tab. I'm asking you to please click on that on the menu, click on the poll tab, and please respond to those questions. We'll give you a couple minutes to respond to the questions. So we have a continuum that's up on our screen. And if you're apathetic, it means that you don't have an understanding of the issues of women and allyship. If you are aware, it means that you know the basic concepts, but you're not active on behalf of yourself or others. If you're active, it means that you're well informed, sharing and seeking diversity when asked or prompted. And if you're an advocate, which we're hoping that many of you are, you're committed, routinely and proactively championing inclusion. And this is allyship across all different levels, not just for women. However, today we are focused on women. So if we can take a moment to please respond to that poll. It is anonymous. We would greatly appreciate it so that we understand where we're starting from today on our discussion on allyship. We'll give you just another minute so that we can get the results of the poll up on our screen. Okay, it looks like we have very few people who have no understanding of allyship, which is great, 2.7%. We have 37.8% of our team that's aware, 24.3% active, and I'm happy to see that we have 35.1% of our members who are advocates. This is fantastic. It looks like we do have some work to do, but at least we're on the right track and heading forward. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. We really appreciate it, and it is going to help us as we continue to do our work. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel. Lisa Agard is CEO of Telecommunications Services of TS Trinidad and Tobago Limited. She has extensive legal and executive management experience in the telecommunications and broadcasting sectors, both locally and regionally. Prior to her current role, Lisa was the general manager of Amplia Communications, which was acquired by TSTT in 2017, and which was prior to that part of Massey Group of companies. She was an integral part of the launch of Massey's high-speed broadband and TV to residential customers in Trinidad and Tobago in 2016. Before that, she was the managing director of Guardian Media Limited, one of the largest media companies in Trinidad and Tobago. Lisa has just over 23 years telecommunications experience, having started her telecommunications career when she joined Cable and Wireless in 1998. While there, she served in various regional capacities, including Director Legal Services and Executive Vice President Legal, Regulatory and Carrier Services. Lisa played a significant role in the liberalization of telecom sector across the region and the negotiation of the end of C&W's exclusive licenses in many Caribbean territories. Welcome, Lisa. Simone Martin-Sullivan is the Vice President of C&W Communications, Flow Trinidad. Simone, a native of Trinidad, has over 15 years experience in the telecommunications industry. She's worked across the Caribbean, holding senior management positions in Trinidad and Tobago, the Cayman Islands, and the Southern Caribbean. After pursuing an MBA and MSc in International Business Development and Consulting in Germany and France, respectively, she returned to the Caribbean in 2014 and began her tenure with C&W as the Vice President of Mobile Operations of the Bahamas Telecommunications Company. Before being appointed to CNW's Trinidad business, she served as Senior Commercial Director of the South Caribbean, a wide portfolio that included the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, the Dutch Caribbean, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, and Dominica. Welcome, Simone. And then we have Franklin Butler. He is the President and Group CEO of Cable Bahamas. Since returning to the Bahamas in 2003, after completing a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and Finance, he joined his family's business of Milo Butler Group, an investment holding group which with diverse interests in the Bahamian capital markets, where he served in several capacities. He has established himself as a family business resource, strategic thinker, and value-added partner throughout the Bahamian capital markets. Franklin is considered one of the region's leading experts in corporate governance and succession planning in family businesses. He's often used as a resource for speaking and educating multi-generational businesses on the do's and don'ts of managing the family and the business. In 2017, Franklin was appointed Executive Vice President of Cable Bahamas Group and was appointed President and CEO in 2018. In addition to this role, Franklin serves as Chairman and Director of AML Foods Limited and Chairman and Director of Be Alive Limited. He also serves as Director of Nassau Port Development Company Limited and Director of Bahamas Property Fund. What an impressive panel we have this morning. Please note that at the end of the session, we will have a 20-minute Q&A. As we go along, feel free to post your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can in the allotted time. Over to you, Victoria. Let's have a great and insightful discussion.
Great, thanks a lot, Wendy, and this is exciting. I'm really delighted. Great to have the three of you. Impressive. You've your work and what you've done, and always a pleasure also to interact with Wendy, who also has been doing an amazing job. So what we're going to do now is have a panel discussion, because it's nice to hear what each one of your companies is doing. You heard a lot about what we're doing at the IDB, and I'm really curious about what your companies are doing. So maybe we start first with what has been your company doing to support women in ICT? And also the topic is allyship, right? So what has your company been doing to encourage this allyship? And let me start first with Lisa. Lisa, do you want to go ahead and take us through what your company has done?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Victoria. So I think we need to contextualize the question and in fact, first address the issue of why ICT is important before we look at the role of women in ICT and what we're doing to support that. And why is ICT important? The World Bank has published for many years, Victoria, you would be very familiar with this, many econometric studies which link broadband development to economic development. As Stephen went through in some detail in his earlier presentation, there is a significant correlation in third world countries between economic development and broadband connection. And we are blessed to be part of an industry in which every single citizen of the country utilizes our services, and our services are inextricably linked to development of our countries. I heard Stephen talk a lot about the gap in terms of broadband penetration. I am very happy to report that in Trinidad and Tobago, we have one of the highest broadband penetrations in the world. It currently stands, based on the latest TAT report, it currently stands at 87% of household penetration. We have 95% population coverage of broadband, which means that there is an issue of affordability, because clearly it is available. Some people can't afford the take-up, so that is an issue to be addressed. And we also have at least 1.1 million of our 1.9 mobile subscribers having internet on their devices. So the access piece of ICT in Trinidad and Tobago is very well taken care of. However, there are two other indexes where we do have some work to do, and this is where the whole question of the role of women in ICT comes into play. So the ITU has developed this thing called the IDI index, which measures not just access, which, as I said, we are well poised to deal with in Trinidad and Tobago, but it also looks at two other important vectors, which is ICT skills and ICT usage, both of which have been recognized as significant areas to be addressed under the National ICT Plan of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago. We do not score very well on those two vectors, and as a consequence, since this is a composite index, Trinidad and Tobago does not score as well as some of our counterparts in the Caribbean, for example, Barbados. So, and of course, usage really speaks to not just government digitalization of services that governments provide to the population, but also the private sector. So the private sector is not left out of this equation. And of course, the very significant issue of skills development. So this is where we come in as a telecommunications company. As you can imagine, everything runs on some kind of ICT network. So ICT capability within the context of a telecommunications company is important. So there's that issue of contextualizing the importance of ICT to Trinidad and Tobago. Mm-hmm. To consider women in ICT, we have to look at having women in place to benefit from ICT program development that we have in the company. And again, I am very happy to report that when you look through the management layer of TSCT, we are currently about 48% women, 52% men. In our wholly owned subsidiary company, Amplia Communications Limited, which manages our residential fiber customers, the executive layer, the metrics are even better. It's about 55% female and the rest male. So we have, I think at TSCT, some work still to do in terms of getting more women in management positions. I would like to see it more 50-50, quite frankly. So we do have some more work to do, but we have women in place. Once you are an employee of TSCT, we have developed quite a few online training tools that makes available to all employees training in telecommunications, in cybersecurity, in ICT generally, so you can avail yourself of all of those training tools and capabilities to develop your ICT skills. So it's a long answer to the question, but I think it was important for us to always bear in mind the significance of ICT development to the economic diversity and development of our third world countries.
Thank you, Lisa. And that's very important because to set it in context and to hear what your company is doing, very impressive. And the targets that you're getting to, which we know is a lot of work and it takes time. So now, Lisa, let me turn to you and find out what is your company doing to promote women that are in ICT? Share with us some of it.
Thank you, man. Simone.
Simone, yes.
Simone.
Hi, Victoria. Good morning. Good morning, Franklin. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, everyone tuning in. I'll take a little bit of a different approach to answer that question, focusing more on the EQ side. As you said, it's about the people that work within our industry and how do we create these opportunities for equality, diversity, and inclusion. At Liberty Latin America, it is very much a cornerstone of our business, and understanding that we need to create these opportunities. The business launched a very aggressive program, one that draws on volunteers from within the organization, because after all, it is about getting different perspectives in order for us to change the present status quo and the outcome. And not only are we a business that walks the talk, but you can see from the appointment of our first ever female CEO for all of Cable and Wireless, Inga Schmitz, that there has actually been a significant change and an intentional strategic shift to promote women in such executive leadership positions, of which I am a, beneficiary.
Right.
Our EDI programs are quite vast, and we are working all avenues, looking at things like role modeling, looking at, developing local talent, looking at ways that we bring that equality into every avenue. For example, I know it's not necessarily dealing with women, but we also have paternity leave, paid paternity leave, because it's talking about that whole allyship. Why should I, as a woman going on maternity leave, be the only one responsible for raising a family? So it's understanding that allyship takes many different forms, and we're now putting those policies in place. So in terms of what's our goal and our vision moving forward, last year, my appointment in early May, I think Lisa's would have come shortly thereafter in June, to show that understanding the importance of the telecommunications space and it plays, and having the need to have the perspective of the female perspective on how do we now evolve and move forward. What we're seeing is, as I think the Honorable Minister Shamfa Kajo said, it's about lifting as you climb. Yes, what we are doing is we need to bring others up with us. So for example, the executive team at Flow Trinidad is presently 84%.
Simone, sorry to interrupt. Can you speak a little bit slower?
Sure, no problem.
So there's something with the communication. Thanks a lot.
Understood. So as I said, right now our executive team is presently 84% female, and we're definitely doing what you're calling it. We're bringing forward that female power to try to bring that ahead, and also having clear endorsement from males within the organization, as you clearly articulated in your slides. That ally falls between the guidance of a mentor and the assigning of a sponsor, and becoming an advocate to let women know, look, you are ready to take that next step. We need your perspective. We need you to have a seat around the table, so that at the end of the day, that output, right? That output is better.
Yes, wonderful. It's so nice, because it is, that passion that you see and that engagement that you see from both sides, right? Which is critical in this partnership. Thanks a lot, Simone. And now, Franklin, to you, right? You've been quite an ally, and it's interesting to hear your perspective again on how your experience and how the women are supported, the women in ICT. So over to you, Franklin. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Victoria, Simone, and Lisa. Good morning, everyone. My own experience as it relates to being an ally with women really has to do with initially my exposure. I had the benefit, first of all, of being a director of cable before I became a member of the executive leadership team. And really had an opportunity through my own personal education to have some key influences on my life and my perspective of women. And firstly, even Schallenberg, who I had an opportunity, who wrote the book Lean In, and really focused on the importance of allowing women to lean in around the board table. So I think that set a foundation and a curiosity for me around what it meant, because for me, it started very personally with my wife, and getting her to lean in and making sure that as a professional as well, who as a professional attorney, she had an opportunity to proceed or to progress in a way that was equal to every male. And of course, me in my own roles, I think that in itself has implications when you're married as well. So I think that was the first thing that set the tone. And then as I got more involved in executive leadership of cable, you start to question, what are we doing as an organization? And certainly, when I joined the business, I think we had no female executives at all in leadership. And to the point up until now, I think we have about 50% of all of our executives are women. And really, it was not a case of entitlement, but really what we found was that women were prepared to make the sacrifices, were fully committed to the organization. In fact, quite often, they just wanted to have the opportunity to understand what was required. And so I've personally gotten involved in a couple of things that I think, I hope has made a difference. One is any executive leadership. You know, I attend a lot of the executive leadership courses. We had one particularly last year, which was done virtually, where we had Jan, the CEO of Princess Cruises. She was actually doing a case study, and she was speaking about what it was to run Princess Cruises during the crisis. And so what I did was I used it as an opportunity to allow some of our executives to participate, to make sure they had an opportunity to understand the CEO's issues. What are the executive issues of a company of a different size and perspective? We're all trying to figure out the pandemic at that time, but also beyond my own personal experiences and driving that type of exposure, we've always been advocates of girls in ICT, which is really led by the regulator here in the Bahamas. And we have always had a firm focus since I joined the business and we launched Alive 5 years ago, where we've really featured out on technology and really the work that they have done to really, whether that, and that included going into schools and mentoring, you know, developing STEM programs and sponsoring through whether our foundation or even through our marketing spend, to make sure that we were developing, not only in the organization, but as a country, how we're developing interest in STEM programs as well. And then if I think about my journey as a father, when you think about the personal implications that this have for your daughter, for me, who is 3 years old, these things become very real. This is not something that you do because it's a nice to do. It's something that really has real implications, because you say, listen, if I'm not paying it forward for Felicity, Felicity's going to have no hope, right? And so I've been very intentional about making sure that everything we do as an organization and how I leverage my office and my influence is really driven around making sure that women have fair opportunity, they have the exposure and the development. And I talk about women, but also men, making sure they have the exposure. Until Reed and Cheryl kind of opened my eyes to this idea of equity and equality, really it was no consequence. And so really, I think that exposure, I think for me has been something that's been very personal. And as an organization, you know, we've also gone into the technical schools, which we call BTBI as well. We have sponsorship programs into some of our technology areas where we're very intentional about making sure we get women to be a part of that, or young ladies to be a part of our programs, to make sure that we are developing a pipeline of interest. And we did the same thing with our management development program, which we take usually from the University of Bahamas, the best of their technical leaders. And we're pretty adamant that we want to make sure that, you know, there are women who have the qualifications and the curiosity who want to grow and develop, and we take them through a course of development. And those are now future leaders and senior leaders in our organization as we continue to try to develop the pipeline below the executive level to make sure this is just not a one-off, but a continuum within our business.
Yeah, great, Franklin. Thanks a lot. It's you know, I can sense your commitment and passion in this, and that's what we see a lot. You know, male colleagues that really believe in this, and particularly when the leadership takes it as a priority, right, and says this is important to do. And also one of the things that we discuss sometimes with male colleagues is, you know, I show you that confidence code book and so forth, because, you know, building confidence, you know, it's a topic that we talk about. And as we talk about it, because we also give them a copy of these books, right? The two books I mentioned are pretty important, but it's also around, you know, with their daughters, they're very committed, you know, with, you know, sisters, with whatever. It's, you know, it's, you don't have to sell too much the concept. They're really there. So it's great to see that, Franklin. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to go back to Lisa. And Lisa, maybe if you can share a little bit about your experience in allyship, you know, mentoring, what was, you know, that experience, any lessons learned, anything that you could share in terms of that? I think you're on mute.
Yes, thank you again, Victoria. And as I listened to Simon and to Franklin and also Wendy, it really warms my heart to see Liberty Latin America, Cable and Wireless Communications embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because when I joined Cable and Wireless, 23 years ago, I was oftentimes the only female among the executive leadership team in the Caribbean, or sometimes only one of two or one of three at maximum throughout my career at Cable and Wireless. So I am so pleased to see the direction in which that organization is going. And Simon, just to correct the record, I think I was appointed before you. So nice try. It's convent. It's a convent thing. But I would say, and one of the challenges that I have with the topic of male allyship is a very personal one to me. I do not think, and I cannot recall a time in my career where I actively sought out a male ally to mentor me or to advise me or to play a role in my career development. Not that male bosses have not had an impact on my career, but I never actively sought it out. In those days, there were no definitive programs to encourage allyship. I would, however, say that women in leadership, particularly at Cable and Wireless at the time, the women in, who were, most of the time based in London, they were the ones who played an active role in seeking women out, developing, sponsoring, mentoring women. And so therefore, I think in my current role, and in the role that I had at Amplia Communications, it is now on me as a leader in this role to actively select women, to develop them, to mentor them, and even if it is not in the context of any formal program, to do so. I am a firm believer that women leading organizations, whether it's in the political sphere or in business, make better leaders for a whole variety of reasons. And so therefore, I think the burden is now on us. And I can say that since I have been at TSCT, there have been 2 executive positions that have come up, and both have been filled by women. And that was a part of a deliberate strategy on my part to encourage women, to seek them out, and to develop them within the organization.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And it's so nice to hear about that, because some years back, we found that it was important for us to also create a group. We have a group of managers, and we're the supervisors, right? The women's managers group, we created it because we also felt that mentoring each other was important, and particularly helping those that were coming behind us. And, we meet, quarterly and so forth. So there are different avenues of things that you can create. And as you said, sometimes the mentoring has been less. But also, as we found, with how we involve males in our mentoring program, it has been exciting to see how they see that as a role that also they should play. So let me now turn to Simone, and if you can share with us again what has been your experience. Yeah.
Sure. My experience has been a little bit differently in that I went through a couple of things. I did actively seek out male assistants, reason being I wanted a seat at the table. And I was like, if they're all there, what do I need to do to have a seat on the table and to have my voice heard? So I had been fortunate enough to have both mentors and sponsors, because I think the 2 of them are very important. And then ultimately from that group, converting 1 or 2 into actual advocates who will now help, guide, coach, provide you with that constructive feedback, things that you probably are a little bit too blind to hear. And the reason I did that is I think sometimes we are so unaware of self and how we come across that oftentimes, if it is you're trying to join a group, it's good to find out from that group what type of traits are they looking for to have you come into the fold. So I try to understand what strengths or what muscles should I flex and which ones should I dial back in order to now be part of that collective. And how I went about doing that was I decided what type of person I wanted to come across as, what was my personal brand. So I was honest with myself in deciding what things I wanted as well as what things I didn't want, because sometimes there is a personal price that is too high, like sacrificing maybe family, mental health, all of these things in the pursuit of excellence, in the pursuit of leadership. Yes. Secondly, I was brave enough to take a risk, right? Brave enough to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with exposing vulnerability and being able to show, look, I don't have all the answers and I obviously cannot do this on my own. And then lastly, having the resilience to fail, make mistakes, right? And again, ask for help. And I think with all of those, that personal brand that I've created for myself now allows me to have some allies that I can call on at any point in time, because they've taken part of that journey with me. And I'm paying that forward, working together with a team, because it does take a village, right? So it's about you, the people you report to, the people around you, so that they can then also pay it forward. And then you have almost like a self-supporting environment, an ecosystem where someone the level below me is doing the same for a woman on their team, someone below them, and so on and so forth. And then you finally have that critical mass, everybody moving in the same direction, collaborating together to make the organization better, because you're bringing together different perspectives so that the decisions that are made, consider all involved rather than coming from one particular place. So that would have been my experience. And again, I'm happy because obviously some things worked, and I think our organization is also richer for it. So I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, no, great, Simone. And it's a great example because you proactively, as you said, seek that allyship, went back to the male colleagues. And that's part of what we're encouraging, because depending, sometimes some women are more hesitant. And so we've been very deliberate about saying, no, hey, you need several mentors out there. It's not just one. Peers, it's from everywhere, because you find out a lot about, things you can do and how to progress. And also, that they become a lot of times sponsors. So that's key, right? Because they're sitting at the table talking about you. So it's something that, that networking is really, really key to do. Now, Franklin, tell us about your experience with allyship.
Yeah, thank you again, Victoria. And I think one of the things that really stands out for me as I think about my journey in allyship is the fact that I come from what I would call a family with political history. So much so that I have a cousin who was the first leader of the opposition of the Bahamas. Mm. Obviously, I talk about my family business experience. It's no secret. And one day we were at a board meeting, and she said she was actually appointed chairman of a meeting of one of our companies, and she said, "Franklin, why am I being appointed now?" Mm. And she shared an article about the glass cliff, which is this idea that oftentimes women only ascend when a company is in crisis and someone feels as if things are very unlikely to go well. And that really pricked my consciousness around, what am I doing to make sure that I am not only promoting women when it's what I call glass cliff scenario, but we are constantly breaking the glass ceiling by making sure that we are giving women the exposure and opportunity to do what they do so well. I mean, there are definitely different skill sets, thinking, ways of analyzing that women offer to a table that men can often be black and white around. And so how do we make sure that that inclusion and perspective is always at the table in a way that's intentional? And so really, after she shared this article around the glass cliff and the particular circumstance that we were dealing with as a family, I was really prompted and motivated to say, listen, I need to be very intentional about making sure that I'm developing a network of mentors. What I find is more and more, because of that relationship I have with her, anytime I'm mentoring another female, because she's been seen as this powerful kind of political figure, I'm able to make introductions. She becomes a part of my natural network, and people say, listen, I want to talk to her. How does she deal with this on a political and national landscape? And so I find that I've developed my own network of, and this is my older cousin, female mentees, have ultimately become a network unto themselves, where I am facilitating much of the conversation, same way I do with males, to other females who are struggling with similar issues, and they get to share their experiences. And this is really what has led us as an organization and from my office to really make sure that we have a Women in Leadership series, that we are going to be inviting people from speakers internationally who I know through my relationship globally, who are going to be doing a series. And I've asked so our PR and comms team, as well as some of our women executives, to be sponsors, to make sure that as I get the talents to speak to us, that they can actually lead the conversations, that they can. And one of the things that I'm struggling with personally is I want this to almost be an in-person session, so that you can ask the intimate questions. Virtual is great, but to really create the sense of intimacy around some of the broader issues that I think Inga Schmidt, the last time this conference was held, talked about, how women are struggling with being professionals and working, and the structures of work, the traditional, what I call a 9 to 5. So how are we building that bridge? Because I think that perspective for men is helpful, but I think it also offers a lot of confidence and assurance to women who are struggling with so many issues.
Yeah, I love those examples and all the proactive things you're doing, because those conversations are indeed where you get all of those important discussions going on, in the commitment and the samples. So let me go ahead and maybe ask a last question that I'm going to ask each one of you to address, and it's how you show up as an ally. You know, what is it that you do? Any tips that you can give? And how do women find those allies? What are some of the things that, you know, you would say that would help them? So maybe, Lisa, if you could go ahead and share.
Sure, thank you. So I think one of the things that the pandemic exacerbated, particularly for women, is this challenge with balancing work life and home life. So as you know, certainly in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, schools were closed, both at a primary level and at a secondary level. And so therefore, the burden and the responsibility of homeschooling online sort of inevitably fell to the mothers in the household. And so at TSTT, we took a very deliberate policy path to support those women in particular by developing a remote working policy that had as one of its criteria, if you have children below a certain age, and if you did have children below a certain age, you were automatically entitled, providing your job would allow remote working, you were automatically entitled to work 5 days from home. We later shifted that to 3 days a week. We're back to it being 5 days a week, depending on where the pandemic is taking us. And I thought that was the most significant thing we could do to be an ally for women in these very challenging times brought about by the pandemic, because they had nowhere to turn to. Because of the crisis of COVID, they couldn't bring their parents into their homes to look after children. They couldn't necessarily have housekeepers look after their children. They had to do it themselves. And so it was important for us to show up in that regard as an ally for all of the females in our organization. I think that's a very recent and continuing example in TSTT in terms of what we do. At a personal level, I certainly have very much an open door policy particularly with women. I encourage, I mentor, I have deep conversations with them about the challenges that they are facing in their daily lives, and particularly around this balancing work and having to take care of the children and in an environment where most of the schooling is taking place from home. So, I continue in my efforts in that regard, and we will see how the COVID forces us to change permanently how we balance that work-life relationship.
Exactly, a big challenge. We know that the virtual has made us even more intense at work, right? So how about you, Simone? What would you say?
So for me, I think I am definitely an advocate for equality, right? It's always about making sure that that message resonates in everything we do, and also acting humbly in that, there's no amount of posturing where people find you unapproachable. And that's where you kind of find yourself cutting off opportunities for allyship. Because again, it goes both ways, right? So always being humble so that anyone can approach you. Also for me, it's about celebrating women. Yes, celebrating women and all of their achievements, no matter how small. As Lisa alluded to, it's been a tough ride for a lot of women these past, going on 3 years now. So even the smallest amount of encouragement definitely goes a long way. And likewise for men, if they want to aspire, they can also come to you. So again, it's a two-way street. So I mean, that would be the way that I promote and show up allyship within Flow.
Great. Thanks, Simone. Franklin, how about you?
So for me, it's really around being as vulnerable as you can, sharing your own experiences. To be honest, the conversation I had with my cousin wasn't an easy one. I mean, it really challenged me. And I think as I've had the opportunity to share that experience in the article that she shared with me, what I found was that engaging in the conversation, you learn so much around the other things that you need to do. And then the other thing I would say that, is important from an allyship perspective is to really make sure that you are doing all you can to make sure you're constantly talent and being clear around what are the expectations for success, whether you are male or female, because what I have found is that is one of probably the biggest things that really matter. In our organization, we really moved from a very, what I would call almost, this is probably my colleagues who've been here a long time, almost nepotism, to what are the real expectations around what success from a commercial perspective, from a leadership development perspective. And those are the things that I work personally hand in hand with our HR leaders and all of our executives to recognize that we are not just here. HR is not an HR thing. This whole leadership development, this whole diversity and inclusion thing is not just being driven by, a nice to have. This is something that all of us as executives, the same way we have to understand to some level the networks and understand to some level the commercial aspects of our business. We all have to understand to some level and be participants in what I call allyship and the diversity and inclusion discussions, because while we may have narrow focuses that are based on our natural skill sets, the more broad we are as a leadership team, the more impact we can have as an organization and certainly in our context for me as a country. So this is really something that I've really attempted to take on. I try to have lots of one-on-ones. I mean, it takes a little bit of getting used to as a male, saying, can I go to lunch? I mean, that is something that in a Me Too movement, which was also not too long ago, you need to be conscious of and make sure that, people understand that this is really about your personal development. I want to hear from you. I want to have, a dialogue and understand what are the things that are a bit of a challenge so that you know how you navigate what I call the training and development and the support mechanisms in the organization in a far more effective way. And I spend a lot of time with our executive team, speak up, like, don't wait for me to figure it out. I'm not in a position to read your mind, to understand what is it we need to do. If we all take ownership for the direction of the organization, for what we do from an allyship perspective, then we have a real opportunity to grow and develop our organization in a way that we'll all be very proud of, male or female.
Yeah, I really love those closing remarks, Franklin, because it is that we all should take ownership and, at the senior level, and this is about all of us, right? The whole organization working together to move towards where we want to be. So thank you all. I think it was a great discussion. I'm going to turn it now to Wendy, who's going to share with us some of the questions from the audience. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. And thank you to the awesome panel. What a great discussion. And I know we can continue on for a few more hours with this topic, but we'll have to save some for the next time. Before I jump into the questions, I just want to read some comments that were posted in the chat by our audience. Having male allyship also enables women to deal with the old boys club. So that's a good plug for women. Bring us into the club. And another comment, it is important to find a balance between gender roles and identities. Women who choose, for example, to be housewives are just as empowered as those who are CEOs. We have to be careful not to reinforce stereotypes about what is a successful woman. Excellent point there, and I'm sure our panel will respond to that. Someone asked, Simone, did you just say that your executive team is 84% female? That's remarkable. Okay, so we'll jump into the first question, which is for Franklin. Can you give some more insight about what you put in place to move the leadership teams from 0% women to 50% women?
I wish I could take all the credit and say that with all of my magical ways of doing stuff, but I think one of the biggest things we did as an organization was we started with one. I mean, I remember as a board member, we had no women executives, and we actually started with a female consultant to help us with some of our HR and diversity and inclusion elements. And through that, because I chaired the HR committee of the board, we were able to drive certain processes. And through what I call fact finding and the research that was being done by this consultant at the time, who became actually our first VP, female VP, we found out that there was really no clear expectation around what did it take to be an executive. And this had implications around the culture of the organization, just how people saw things happened as an organization. And so once we were able to get that consultant in a role as a VP, and I remember, quite frankly, we almost insisted that this was what had to happen, that we wanted this person to become a VP in the organization because we felt she had the experience and exposure and understood the objectives of the HR and Comp committee meeting. And then from there, the rest really became a little bit more of history, because more and more my involvement with the HR and Comp committee, and eventually being the vice chairman of the board, and eventually into the president and CEO, we recognized that we just had to lift the veil. We had to understand what was going on in the organization, understand the facts and the qualifications, and to be clear about what are the expectations. So I personally spent a lot of time on executive leadership, development, training, being clear around what the strategy is as an organization. And I think that is really, once you start to articulate it, you find that more often than not, women will speak up and come and see you on a one-on-one, and male from time to time stroke your ego, as opposed to really telling you, but how are we going to accomplish this? This doesn't make any sense. And so those kind of private conversations and the risks that women kind of speaking up and saying, listen, I think this is the right approach, or that really helped us to identify that we had a strong backbone of female talent that were ready to become leaders in our organization, and we acted on it.
Great, thank you very much for that. Simone, what has been your biggest challenge driving EDI, and also while trying to pay it forward?
So it's about, at the end of the day, it's really evolving the way we think, right? It's a mind shift, it's a cultural shift. And it's venturing into something that largely makes a lot of people uncomfortable. You know, I now need to accept someone who is different from me. And it's about making sure that, you know, you get that general buy-in to let them know at the end of the day, we're all going to be better for this. So it's okay for us to now make that transition from the way we did things to being like, look, this is the way we're going to do it now all together, rather than having one person dictate, you know, the rules of engagement and the rules of the game. So that for me has been one of the toughest things, because, you know, for me, I'm not necessarily part of the old boys club. I'm not old by any stretch as far as I would consider. So it looks, you know, you kind of have to give people that confidence to believe in what you're doing and get the buy-in for them to understand that at the end of the day, we all benefit regardless. And that has been one of the biggest challenges, I would think, in driving this agenda.
Thanks for that, Simone. And we're staying with you. We have another question for you. How well are other women supporting you and other women in leadership roles and the efforts for gender equity?
So with that, it's been, of course, a bit of a mixed bag, but happily a lot more supportive than non-supportive. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that most women in leadership, we've all taken a different route to get there, right? Some of us have had to really, scrape on our knees, hands, claw, grab, whereas with others, it's about taking a decision to expose your vulnerabilities and basically showing yourselves that, hey, look, I'm coming to you and asking for help. So I think we pay the same price, but in a different way. And sometimes it can come across as though one person's struggle has been less than the other. So oftentimes you find that there's a little bit of competition or non-acceptance or trying to take away from what another one has achieved. But largely what I find is once we have that one-on-one conversation and say, look, we're all on the same team here, largely you find that the majority are all supportive, because at the end of the day, we are paving the way for their daughters, for their granddaughters, for their great-granddaughters, and they see this as an investment that is going to pay, dividends in years to come. So I would have to say that the experience has been largely a positive one.
Great, thank you. Just want to read a couple more comments that we had in the chat. Excellent point, Simone, on mentorship for both men and women, regardless of gender. And again, Simone, I think you're starring this morning. Well said, Simone. Paying it forward is key to confidence building for female leaders. Our next question for both Lisa and Franklin, I'll have ask Lisa to respond first. There's a risk of being accused of gender bias in favor of women. How do you avoid that?
Wendy, excellent question. Because if you follow politics in the United States, as I do very closely, you will know that there's a lot of discussion around the appointment possibly of the first Black Supreme Court justice, and whether that is in fact positive discrimination. And so the question is a very great one, because you do not want to get to a point where you are accused of positive discrimination in the other direction. So in an effort to advance equity, to advance diversity, you do not want to necessarily promote people on the basis of gender alone. Certainly that is not what we do at TSTT. It's about finding the best person for whatever position we're trying to fill. However, if there is a female that has the qualifications, the experience, the skill set, the soft skill sets of team working, team building, etc., it, I think, behoves us as an organization to fill that role with a woman, if possible. I want to just say one thing, and it's something that I feel so very powerfully about. And women must know their value. I'm co-opting a phrase and an effort led by Mika Brzezinski. Those who follow MSNBC like I do, she's a co-host on the Morning Joe program. Women must know their value. And it's all about developing an empowered community that helps women grow their careers, form healthy habits, and realize their full potential. And it's a community effort. It's not just a single company effort. It's a government effort. It's an NGO effort. It's a community effort. So I just wanted to make that point, something I feel really very strongly about.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Franklin?
Thank you, Wendy. So I think when we think about this question of, I guess, being accused of gender bias for women, for me, it really boils down to what is leadership? What does effective leadership look like? From an organization perspective, if you define what effective leadership looks like, and there are lots of tools to help you. I mean, we've used Myers-Briggs, we've used a ton of different things when we're looking for executive roles, that we let them go through the process, whether male or female, when we have competing candidates. And oftentimes, for the qualities and attributes that we're looking for, women, in the instances where they've been promoted, have had those skill sets at an edge to their male counterparts. And so this has not been about entitlement or just driving women to the top because they deserve it, but recognizing having a baby or having to be out of office to take care of children, that is not an excuse to not be promoted. And so I really want to make sure that we recognize that we are not trying to, as an organization, only promote women. I still have mentorship sessions with all of my executive team. I still invite males to participate in the same organizations, but I'm a little bit more intentional about making sure that women recognize that, listen, this is something that you can do. I don't care whether you're in engineering, I don't care whether you're in, let's set the expectation. I think the pandemic has been really helpful for us from a cultural perspective, because I told people, I think in our organization and maybe many others, people managed accountability through, did I see you at the water cooler? And during the pandemic, you didn't have the benefit of the water cooler. You didn't get to speak to somebody in the corridor. You had to look at the network metrics, you had to look at the commercial issues, you had to look at the fundamentals of the business to determine who was driving impact, who were prepared to make the tough decisions when we were going through the lockdowns and we had uncertainty, et cetera, who provided the level of support to make sure that the organization got through. And some of my own leadership thing was about, listen, even if you had managers who struggled, give them another opportunity. I mean, I had members of my executive team thinking about the same challenges that I was dealing with. And that was not exclusive to males or females, but you found that people who took that approach created a different sense of loyalty, who created a different sense of impact. And that is how we are establishing who are going to be the leaders of the future, not what I call an arbitrary selection of a female because we want to have a metric that says it's 50-50. It's not about that. That is, otherwise you'll create failure. You'll have success today and failure tomorrow because the organization's not going to be sharp, it's not going to be ready, it's not going to be battle tested. And this is about being battle ready to make sure you go out there, grow revenue, grow EBITDA, and the things that really matter, grow a culture that other employees across the length and breadth of the Caribbean want to come and work for you. And I think we've done a fairly decent job of doing that, if I must say so myself.
Great, thank you so much for that, Franklin. A couple of more comments. I think that much of the potency of male allyship is its impact on the insights, perspectives, and engagement of men. Well said. And then we have a comment about the Old Boys Club. The Old Boys Club has little to do with AIDS, Simone, as much as how men will cover for each other and often choose men over women almost as a strategy over a mindset. I wonder who would have posted that. So the next question is open to Franklin, Simone, and Lisa, and I'll start with Simone. What would be your 3 pieces of advice for young, upcoming professional women?
I would start with do some soul searching. Figure out exactly what it is you want and use that as your North Star, right? Because with that, you will know this is what success looks like. And also, it'll allow you to be honest in your pursuit of something because it remains immovable. This is your ultimate end goal. Right? You need to be honest with yourself of what you're not prepared to do, what personal tax is too high in pursuit of that goal. Then the other one would be take risks. Take risks. A lot of women tend to not step up because they're afraid they either fail or they make a mistake. But guess what? Everyone fails. And with that failure, you learn. Either you learn or you win, right? And that for me is one of the biggest roadblocks, I think, with this entire agenda to get more women to step up and take risks. It's okay, right? The organization, we're all here to catch you if you fall, and it's cultivating that sense of community to allow our women to take advantage of reaching out for help, taking that risk, because risk could come in any form. So it'll be honest, take risks, and then of course just be brave. Just be brave. And at the end of the day, you will thank yourself for it because you won't have any regrets. Yeah. So that would be my 3 pieces of advice.
Thank you, Simone, and very great advice. Lisa, what would be your 3 pieces of advice?
Right. So again, coming out of the pandemic, this whole notion of what work is really been turned on its head and why we need to work at all. So again, following what is happening in the United States, and Victoria, you could probably comment on this, a lot of people are opting out of work. They're doing other things. So the whole concept of the Maslow hierarchy of needs is being literally changed on its head. Yeah, so the concept of self-actualization in determining what we do for a living is important. So I say to people, to anybody who comes to me for advice, be passionate about what you do, whether it's at work or at home or at play. The other piece of advice that has certainly served me well throughout my career is be professional and be excellent at what you do. It is that excellence that shines and that allows people to understand your capability, the skills that you bring to an organization. And then the third one, I agree with Simone, take risks. You may fail at some things that you do, but it is better to fail at something and start again and realize, that your mistakes are lessons to point you in the right direction. So those would be my pieces of advice. I wanted to just say something, Wendy, in relation to one of the comments that were made about the concept of positive discrimination in favor of women. And I just want to make the point to this entire team and the people present. I am not a token. I am not here because I am a woman. I am in this position and all the roles I've ever held in my life because I am the consummate professional. I have developed expertise in the areas that I have involved myself in. And I have developed the skill sets necessary to perform the functions of my job. So I reject categorically the notion that any of us women who are in positions of leadership are here because somebody wants to reach a number or reach a statistic. We're not statistics.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Franklin, over to you. What would be your 3 pieces of advice?
Thank you, Wendy. For me, it starts with defining what success looks like, right? I mean, all of us have a choice to determine what success looks like for us from a organization, professional, family perspective, and being clear on that is, I think, foundational in my mind. And then once you've determined what success looks like, for me, it's really about finding a role model that looks like you or you can identify with, to hear their stories, to learn from their journeys. I mean, one of the speakers we have reading for us is Shelley Achamboa, and I recently read her book, Unapologetically Vicious. And I was so impacted by the book, I gave it to my wife, and now all of my wife's friends are reading the book, because once you find somebody who comes from your kind of socioeconomic background or your race or has a story that you can identify with, in my opinion, it acts as a source of encouragement to help you to figure out how you, when you've defined your success, how do you make those pivots on the journey. She much of her own journey in her book, which I found incredibly helpful in helping me as a male to even understand. I mean, the role of a husband was incredible in the book, but I just found it exceptional because it helped to shape my perspective around how you support women and how I'd be a better husband, quite frankly. And then thirdly, I think, it's a bit of a takeoff of what Simone and Lisa say around taking risks, but I call it more being curious. I think if you really want to get more from life, you really want to understand, it's really about being curious, being willing to go and find out, because that's really where the risk starts. In at least saying, hey, where's my interest? How do I get to the next level? Because oftentimes we get boxed in, go and ask our colleague who is exactly where we are and say, how do I do this? But we won't go and ask somebody who is kind of like, listen, how do I get to the next level? I find that one that is exceptionally important for me, because it's one of my personal mottos even now, is being curious. I'm not afraid to ask anybody. I mean, Inga spoke at this conference a year ago. And before I knew it, I was having lunch with her, and she was telling me about, and then Wendy says, listen, will you be a part of the panel? So being curious and understanding people who are on your journey or who are helping to shape and mold you, and I don't care what their socioeconomic background, you can learn from anybody, but you have to have a willingness to be curious, to be open, to explore a little bit more. So those are kind of my three takeaways and suggestions. I don't.
Great, thank you all for the response. And we have another comment here for discussion, Franklin and Lisa. Women want to be chosen because of their skill and not contribute to a statistic. I think that's really important. Victoria, I'm going to put this question to you. The panel has focused on space within gender equity, which can result in young men, regardless of their qualification, being sidelined, which create more ants rather than allyship. Do you want to respond to that in any way?
Yeah, I think that, we're aware of being very careful. And I go back to Lisa's comments that, when we recruit, we want to make sure we recruit the best person, right? What we want to do is to be deliberate about, being careful that we have enough, and as I share with you, having enough candidates, right? 50-50, so we don't start with a different base. And so we are being careful and aware that one of the things we don't want to do is that young men and in general men feel sidetracked. We are putting an emphasis on our diversity, equity, and inclusion framework because we know we have to advance there. We know that, there are areas there, and it doesn't have to do just with gender. For example, for us, it's also around disability. It's also around LGBTQ+. It's around Afro-descendant representation. So we're looking at it in a broader way, and also making sure that within, the leadership and the balance that we maintain, that framework of there's an opportunity for all. And that's why if you see it as allyship, it's important. Also, we have, like, for example, the mentoring program that I mentioned, and that's very important for both, right? Where we try to really bring everybody together. So I think it's an awareness in how you really involve the males, but also make sure that they don't feel sidetracked.
Great, thank you so much, Maria. Before I thank the panel, I want to bring your attention to a link to a survey that was placed in the chat. It's about 5 minutes, and it won't take you more than 2 minutes to complete. Please take a moment to respond. The information gathered will help us as we plan for our activities. I think that we'll all agree that this was a lively, informative, and well-timed forum. We are thankful to have had Victoria moderate our session, as well as for Lisa, Simone, and Lynn for taking time out of your busy schedules to share your experiences with us. We really appreciate the time and all of the work here to encourage us to become allies and mentors as we continue to work towards gender parity in our industry and our region. And I want to leave you with one thing that was showcased in Victoria's presentation. When you accelerate the success of women, you accelerate your own success. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning, and have a great rest of today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.